Okay, I always like to start back, so what we're going to be doing today is finishing up some of the database theory and going into using Microsoft Access. I passed out a diagram. This is called an ERD, an Entity Relationship Diagram. Last Thursday when we met, we talked about database theory and the 4 objects that make up a database. I told you guys to think about a database as a warehouse. And software like Access is known as the database management system. And in a database management system, there's going to be 4 common objects. The first object being a table. What did I tell you a table's sole function? You can think of tables as departments in a warehouse or in a store. Remember, the whole purpose of a database is to store data. Correct? There's going to be tons of data that a database is going to store. So, what do you do with the data? Well, the first logical thing is to organize it. To separate it, to put it in its own little department. And that's what a table is. I like to tell you a table begins with a T, and its only purpose is to store one topic. That topic might be customers. In fact, inside there, you can see all these different tables. You have an office table, employees, customers table, orders, products, and so on. Employees are but they have different roles. One's there for service, translation, by products from our employees. So when you try and create tables, you want to make them special, purposeful. You want to make sure that the table covers one topic. The topic in this employees. What do all the employees have in common? Those little attributes are called fields. In this particular case, our engineer decided to say, or our database administrator decided to say that the employees, all employees, have an employee number. Next to the employee number, a golden key. That's the primary key. What makes the primary key to all the other fields? I gave you the example like, well, wait a minute, I don't remember that product today. What do all products have to identify them? The barcode, right? And no 2 products can have the same barcode. No two employees can have the same employee number. It's a unique identifier, hence the primary key. So I'm saying that if you're an employee at our company, I'm going to give you an employee ID number. You better have a last name. You better have a first name. Now, this particular database was developed in Maya. So they used a character type called variable character length, and then in parentheses it's saying 50. Translation, this field can handle 50 letters. Have you ever noticed when you your schedule for your class for next semester that the course title is which topped off, doesn't print out everything? That's because of this. They're going to store a lot of data, and hence they're going to get large. In fact, databases are one of the very few programs that actually run off your hard drive and not off of memory. So anytime you enter something into a table, it's automatically saved for you. Here I'm saying that each record will only allow a person's last name of 50 characters. To me, I think that's too generous. I think 25 would be more than enough. But what happens if I put it at 5? Well, some of you, the remaining letters would be cut off. And this is where that Y2K bug came in. See, way back in the day, we didn't have the luxurious spaces that we do on our hard drives. So they figured, well, every year begins with 19. Why store that? That's 2 bytes of information per record. So lop that off, and we'll throw that in post. So when we print out our forms, we'll automatically put the 19 in front of it. So when 99 came around, they were concerned. Example might be if you're on a long-distance telephone conversation, and you go from December 31st at 11:59 p.m., 1999, and you call somebody, and then all of a sudden, a second later, it becomes January 1st, 2000. To the computer, it looks like you've been on the phone for 100 years. Because in their database, it's going to be read as January 1st, 1900. Because the only 2 pieces that they kept was the last 2 digits of the year. And why'd they do that? Because per every transaction, we had to store the date. And that added up. And so we had to make this balance between hard drive space and practical use. That's no longer an issue because we live in a world with terabytes. Okay, folks? Which is huge. But here I'm just telling you that this field type, which you're going to see today, is going to allow first the type of data that's going to be entered in. Here I'm going to allow characters and how many characters we're going to allow. In Access, we call that text. Okay? First name, extension, email, office code. Office code's interesting. You notice that there's a line coming from office code and it comes up here. If assuming that this is a big corporation and they have regional offices, they're saying that an employee is tied to a particular office in some region. To me, I might want to put my personal addresses here, what street, what state, what zip code, so that I can send them the 10, W-2s or whatever the case may be. The company's deciding to do it by office. This way we can link the data between here and there and we can share it, making the database more efficient and reduces redundancy. We'll see how that plays out today. Reports to, this is going to be who their manager is. And then finally, job title. Now to me, I would like to put this in another table called job descriptions, correct? But nevertheless, this does what we wanted it to do. Its sole purpose is to keep track of our employees, their names, their job description, and where they work out of, and who their boss is. Our managers feel that's what we need to keep track of, and that's what we're doing. We're storing that. So what do we call a group of related fields? An example for this would be an employee records. So records are groups of related fields. Notice all of our tables in the diagram that I passed out to you guys has the letter S after it. It's like the plural form, orders. So a particular record for orders would be an order. Just like, and a particular record for employees would be an employee. All right, what's the other objects in our database? This is the one that gets used quite a bit. Very seldomly would you guys have access to build this stuff. There are master's degrees and even doctorate degrees in just database technologies. So we're not going to let managers even consider changing the structure of a database. They're allowed to talk to database administrators and say, this is the business objectives, but they're not going to be adding tables. They might even talk to a database administrator and saying, look, there's got to be some way I can track how efficient my employees are being. And how might you measure efficiency? Maybe in this case, the number of sales. Wait a minute. Does it tell you that in here? Does your employees table keep track of sales? Does your database keep track of sales? What table in the database is going to keep track of sales? They don't call it sales, but they call it something else, which should be more than enough. Orders. If you put your finger on the employees table without picking it up, can you make a pathway to orders? In other words, can you trace your way to the orders table? So if I start here at the employees number, follow this arrow, here I am. Notice they called it sales rep number, tomato. And then from here I can go all the way up to this particular field, which is then used to connect this one. In other words, customers buy from employees, and that's being recorded here. Is that not a question? Questions begin with what letter? The word question, what letter does it begin with? Q. What is the second object I'm looking for in a database? Begins with the same letter. Query. And that is an example of a question that an employee or a manager might ask. Another question might be, is it time to order those products? Are we out of those products? Is our inventory low? Is there a table in our database that might keep track of the quantity of our products? Where is my stupid cursor? There it is. Quantity in stock. Notice it's in the products table. How appropriate. Should there be another quantity field somewhere else in another table letting me know how many was sold? What table might have that? Why order details and not orders itself? Why do I have two separate tables? One orders and the other one order details. What does the details represent? The line items. See, think about this for a second. The order details is going to have the customer information, the date that was purchased, the date that it was shipped, and the status. That's like the header information of an invoice. And then underneath that is like the body, correct? And you notice it's all those different line items, each product, because you might buy more than one thing. And so over here, we keep track of each of those line items by associating the order number with the order. So we're tying them together. That if each of these order numbers have these purchases, they come back to this table. Hence a query might be, what did you buy? A question. And that's what you guys are going to see. We're going to ask those questions in a minute when we go to create queries. Okay. The way you see this is not very intuitive. In fact, when you're browsing on a web page, you might only interact with one page. And that page might have a really long form. Like when you purchase something, it's going to ask you for what? Your name, first and last, your street address, your credit card number, possibly your phone number. Correct? And then somewhere in there is what you purchased. So the line items. And then it's going to be a submit button. All on one page to make your shopping experience really pleasant. What object in a database management system does that for us? Because we will have to develop that object. We'll probably develop it after break. What object in our database allows it for a more user-friendly interface? In other words, what object allows us to have a user interface? I use a web page as an example because once again, they stack on top of the tables. You interact with web pages. Ultimately, the data that you input into these web pages are stored in the tables. What do we call that on a web page? I said it earlier. Form. Yep. So the third object is going to be a form. That's where the managers come in. That's where you as employees come in. When you check out at a XYZ company, the thing that they see on their screen is a form. They don't see the tables. They don't even know where the stuff and how it's organized. So where it's organized and how it's organized, that's all dependent on the database administrator. But something does print out. We typically call this a receipt or a bill. Now, in database terminology, what do we call that? When we print out this stuff in a very organized manner. We take the data and we convert it into information and we print it out. Like you might call it your schedule after you get done registering for classes. Reports. I want to make sure that we're familiar with this. This is your roadmap. This is the blueprint on how we're going to create a database. I always start here before I actually jump into Access. This gives you a bird's eye view of how the company is going to be run. The whole sole purpose of this database is to keep track of sales. In order to sell something, we have to have products. Do we have a table that keeps track of products? Okay, what's important to keep track of when it comes to products? Is there anything about vendor information in that product table? Okay, does it tell you the name of the vendor or just a vendor number? So when I scroll down here and I look at the products table, it just says product vendor, correct? To me, what I would do to add to this table later is I would make this a foreign key and connect it to another table. What would you call that table? Vendors, right? And what might be kept track in that table called vendors? Don't they have salespeople too? So like the sales representative, their address, their phone number, their email. Isn't that very similar to what we do with employees? Let me go back to employees. Look at employees and look at customers. Both of them have first and last names, correct? Both of them have emails. Well, this one doesn't, but maybe it could have it. But phone numbers, or whatever the case may be. That's common. Does that mean they both have the same last names? No, remember, these are just generic fields that hold a small piece of data that represents an attribute. In this case, a person. And isn't it quite common that we all have first names and last names? They might not be the same. What else do we all have in common? Social security numbers? Date of birth? And if that information is important, I'm going to create a field for that. So like I said, if I was improving on this database, I would make another table called vendors. What else does it allow? Have you asked any question what that N is? I would have personally made that an M or an infinity symbol. Notice it says 1 to N, 1 to N, 1 to 1. Interesting. And then over here it says 1 to N. What does that N mean? Let's go back to the employees. Hell, let's even talk about customers. Look at this one right here. Customers to orders, 1 to N. There's an ad on the radio that I hear all the time, and it says, we pride ourselves of our returning customers. Shouldn't any business pride themselves of returning customers? So is it quite possible that a particular customer, let's call this person John Doe, could order many different times from our company? In fact, we want them to order a lot of different times, correct? So that's why I like replacing it with the letter M, because it means one to many. That a single customer here is going to have many orders. That's what our intent is. Is that a possibility? Okay, what about this one-to-one relationship? Per each order, we're going to map a one-to-one line item. In other words, we're going to have many line items per this order, correct? But that single line item is only going to be to that order. Case in point, Brittany and I both order something from the company. Well, let's use Brittany and Adam because they both seem to order the Monster beverage. Okay? So in that transaction, Brittany is going to be tied to this order. You good with that? And in that order, there's going to be one line item that's going to say Monster. Everybody's okay with that? Adam comes in, whether it's the same store or not, I really don't care. He makes an order. And he's going to order the same thing as Brittany. But his order is going to be on a different record. Because him and Brittany did not buy it together, correct? Although they ordered the same product. And that's why the details is connected to the product table. And you see that relationship, one to many? That same product can be purchased many times. Does that make sense? But only is it associated to one order at that time. Because she could come back tomorrow and buy the same product, but it's a different order. If it's a different order, we're going to give it a different line item. What do we gain by doing that? Prices could change. Look at gasoline. It seems like every day the prices are changing, correct? And hell, if you go in the morning, it might be cheaper than the afternoon. So by associating it one-to-one, the prices could change. In fact, do you see I have that item right here? So each time there's a transaction, I could update the price in between the last two transactions. Will it get retroactive? In other words, if Brittany bought that at $1 and he bought that at $2, when I change it from $1 to $2, do I send the bill in here and say, you owe me $1? No, it's good at that time. Hence what this table's all about. They call it orders, I call mine transactions, but nevertheless, still the same accomplishment. Okay, let's close out of this. You guys have that diagram? Like I said earlier, the most important thing about a database is none of the records are stored in memory. This is very critical. Have you guys gone around and do some advising this week? I think first day was yesterday. You'll notice our system's running god-awful slow. Now, all of the courses that we offered, and when they're offered, is stored in a database. What is the slowest part of a computer? Remember the whole components? Out of all those components, what was the slowest part? The hard drive. Where does your database run off of? The hard drive. And when you have a lot of people accessing it at the same time, like when people go cyber shopping on Mondays, right after Thanksgiving, you notice websites are god-awful slow. That's because there's a lot of transactions going on at these databases. And since these transactions are recorded on hard drives, these websites are going to load a lot slower. This week and throughout advising, it might take your advisor forever to bring up your class schedule or the classes that are offered because there's a lot of people hitting that database and they're all being ran off of the slowest component of the computer, the hard drive. With that being said, it's the very first time, if you guys click on Start, that when you open up an Office application, you can't just jump in it head first. So I'm going to go to Start, All Programs. I'm going to click on Microsoft Office, and then I'm going to click on Microsoft Access to 2010. See, when you open up Excel, or when you open up Word, or when you open up PowerPoint, you can jump in head first. You're not greeted with this screen right here. But rather you're greeted with an empty document, an empty presentation, or an empty Excel. This one they're saying, wait a minute, what are you going to do? Now, of course, they offered us some templates, but I want to start with a blank database. Do you guys have that option? Is it already highlighted in orange? Go over to the right, and where it says File Name, replace that. Let's call this Sales. See, now I'm forced to give it a file name. And in a moment, I'm going to click on this little manila envelope, and I'm going to give it a location. I'm going to save mine to my flash drive. You can save yours to documents. That'll work. So let me go to 2013, 1390. So unlike Word, Excel, and a PowerPoint, before you even begin a database, you actually have to create it. Folks, before you can build a warehouse, what must you own? The land to put it on, correct? That's what we're doing here. Let's hit create. All right, sorry about that, guys. As you can see, databases are very sensitive to privileges. For some reason, my account did not have administrative privileges to create the database that we're about to create today. So I had to sign in as the administrator. Here I am. Are you guys at the same thing? Did it automatically create a generic table for you? All right, I'm not a big fan of 2010 doing this. I'm sort of an old school person and I need to go into design view to do this. And the reason why I teach that way is because it's backwards compliant with 2007, 2003, and before. I'm not sure what 2013 will do. It will work, and I'll show you guys how to do it in this view later. Obviously, we have like 5 tables or so to create. So I'm going to start you off with the traditional way of creating a table, and that's through design view. And then I'll have you go through this way, through the table view, if you will. The problem I have with this view is it allows you to enter records as you're entering fields. And I hate that, because my whole purpose is, most of the time when you guys use a database, you'll never see a table. In fact, you'll probably see forms or web pages, and that's it. But when you start learning database theory, you need to wear 2 hats. I call the one hat the architect, and the other one the hard hat, right? The actual worker. And so in this case, when you go to see it this way, the view is misleading because it allows you to accomplish both things. That is entering in data and also adding fields. How often should you add fields? Only the time you create the table. The reason why you don't want to allow the users to add fields randomly later on is that when you have 1,000 records already stored in a table, by adding 1 field, there's going to be 1,000 records missing that piece of information. What is it easier, to add on to your existing house or to build a new house from scratch and to make sure you accommodate everything? You know your house is going to need a bathroom, right? Put it in there. It's not going to be easy to add that bathroom in after the house is built, correct? So this is why you have to put a lot of forethought, and this is why we're putting a lot of energy in talking about this diagram than we are getting into using the program. The program isn't all that hard. It's to understand why they do what they do. Case in point, let's close out of this thing. Close out of this table, click on the X over here. You guys will have a Create tab. Click on that Create tab. Lo and behold, you will see the 4 objects we've already talked about. Tables, queries, forms, reports. Over here in Tables, click Table Design. There's a lot of different views when it comes to access. One of the most common views is called the Design view. Here you're talking about the schematics. You're looking at the blueprint. You're not getting into the actual room itself. You're not erecting it. All you're talking about is what the room or what the table is going to store or house. You good about that? Luckily for us, I listed that information for you in this ERD. So in the employees table, you know you have to have a field called employees number. Look how that's written. Lowercase e, then capital number. No spaces. We call this camel text. You know, camel's got humps. The reason why we don't put any spaces in it is it's treated like a variable in programming. We start lowercase, then the next word after it gets a capital letter, but it's glued in. There is no space. If this was a field name that had 3 words in it, lowercase for the first word, the second word, uppercase for the first letter, the third word, uppercase for the first letter. Does that make sense? Like maybe employee last name, capital L, capital N. All right? Where it says data type. When you click on that, does it automatically do text for you? Maybe you might do like a C00 something like your college ID number. To me, when I'm thinking employee numbers, let's make them numbers. But more importantly, when you click on that arrow pointing down, you're going to have 2 types. You're going to have number and auto number. I don't know about you, but the last thing I'd like to do as a manager is to assign an employee a number. I want to be able to click the new employee button, and when I click on that, the database automatically generates the number. Because if you had to do it, what would you have to make sure before you assign an employee a number? Nobody else doesn't have it, correct? And I'm not talking about currently, but I'm talking about both past and present, right? Because if you fire somebody middle of the year, you're still going to have to give them a W-2. So they still need an employee number. So I'm going to click on auto number. But that doesn't necessarily guarantee that it's going to be unique. All that means is that the database is going to automatically assign it. In order to make it unique, we got to go up top and click on this primary key button. Now by doing so, we have a little gold key next to that field. And that tells the computer that it's going to be unique. Let's click on the next row underneath it. Notice I called it a row and not a record. When I go into the actual datasheet view, I will start calling it a record. Right now, fields are listed vertically. And the datasheet view, they're going to be listed horizontally. They're going to go across the screen. All right, what's the next one? Last name? So, last. Now, I'm going to do something special. I'm going to type in EMP, then capital letter L for last, and then capital letter N for name. Now, the reason why I'm doing that is, to me, the EMP represents what table I'm in. Because I'm going to have those fields in other tables, like customer last name, like vendor's last name. So by looking at the EMP, I can see that this field belongs to what table? Employee. Because when we start linking these things together, we're going to be grabbing fields from other tables. It's not going to look too pretty. All right, let's click on data type. What type should we make this, folks? Text. Let's come down here to the properties. Do you need 250 characters to represent a person's last name? No, it's a little ridiculous. So let's click down there and remove the last 5 and leave it at 25. So if you know somebody that has every letter in the alphabet, then they're 1 letter short. I think 25 letters is more than enough for a person's last name. Remember, you got to be conscientious about this, because there's going to be hundreds, maybe even thousands of employees. And so by me chopping off and saving 225 bytes, because remember, 1 letter, 1 byte, if I have 1,000 records, that's what? 2.5 million? So I saved myself 2.5 megabytes. I know it doesn't sound that much, but who knows? If you're in business for 1,000 years, it's going to add up. All right, let's do the same thing for first name. Imp first name. Hit the tab key, it should automatically go to data type. It's going to say text. And what else do we have? Extension. Interesting. What type should we make the phone extension? Text or number? How do you format a phone number? So it prints out on business cards? Because remember, folks, we want to store the data in a central location so that we can use it over and over. One place that we're going to be using it over and over is when we print out employee business cards, right? Why should I have to re-enter that stuff in there when if this is a new employee, there should be a record in the employees table, correct? So when I go to print out business cards, their phone number should be in there. So once again, how do you format a phone number? Look at a business card. Does a phone number contain only numbers? No. Sometimes parentheses, sometimes dashes. So yeah, it's going to be text. But it's going to be formatted differently, right? Let's see. We have left parenthesis, 3 digits for the area code, right parenthesis, then 3 digits for the local exchange, the regional exchange, and then a dash, and then another 4 digits, so 13. Let's come down here. It says field size. Let's make it 15. This way you can put like a 1. But underneath that, do you see where it says format? Let's click on that box for that property. Let's click on the arrow pointing down. Did it give me any choices? That's disappointing. Why offer a box pointing down when I'm not getting anything just yet? Well, let's click off of that. So let's click that arrow so it jumps back in. But let's click on the input mask. Notice this time I get some dots. Click on that button that has 3 dots in it. It's going to say you should save your table. Let's do that. Let's go ahead and click save, or yes. Let's give it a name. I think it's supposed to be called employees. Notice I capitalized the E, employees. Let's click OK. Let me tell you the difference between format and input mask. When we clicked on the format drop-down box, nothing appeared, and the reason why nothing appeared because it was a text. How do you format text? You don't. But if it's a number can be formatted many different ways. In Excel, we can format it as an accountant format. What's the other way we can format a number in Excel? Currency. By the way, these are testable questions. And what's the other way? As a number itself, but it can throw commas and decimal places for us, correct? So if we picked for data type number, we can come down to that property called format, and I should have integer, long integer, accountant, currency, and so on. But since this data type is text, I didn't have that. That led me to go to the input mask. The input mask basically governs what the person puts in there. If they start entering in a phone number, it's going to automatically throw in the parentheses for them, the appropriate spaces, and the dashes. Let's give this a try. In the box that says try it, let's see. Hit the home key and start typing in a number. And you see as I start typing in this number, it automatically fills it where it's supposed to be at. I love this because this gives my table consistency. If I'm printing business cards, I want everybody's business card to be the same. So this way I don't get a whining person saying, well, why does Bob have a better business card than I do? The input mask sort of governs what you're going to put in there without prevent you from putting in something. Let's try putting in the letter A.
When I'm in the text and I click on the input mask and the 3 dots, it says must save table item first.
Yep.
Save now.
And give it a name.
And then I give the name employee.
Yep.
And then when I hit OK, it
doesn't allow you to save it. Don't tell me that. Yeah, it did. Good. No, it didn't. Folks, did it save your table as employee and not as... All right. That's why. You got to right click on here, this text field property, and choose delete row. Good. Now click back on there. Now click save. You had an empty field, if you will.
Oh, okay.
You started a field, but you didn't give it a name. Yeah, S, please. There you go. Click OK. If that happens to you and you're unable to save a table, make sure you have your fields completed. Both you gave it a name and a type. All right, let's click finish. I like the fact that it's a phone number, and it governed the only allowed you to enter in numbers. Even though we made the field a text, the input mask, 1, formatted it appropriately, and 2, prevented letters from being entered in. All right, why don't you guys finish off with the last couple? Oops, employee email. So make sure you guys add imp to everything. When it comes to emails, leave it as 255 characters. There are some goofy names out there. When it comes to office code, just leave it as 10, like it's specified in your diagram. Let me show you how I did reports. I didn't add imp to it. In fact, I'm going to remove office code, so it's just office code without the imp to it. And the reason why I'm showing you that is just to show you how you can go back and relabel your fields, if you will. When I did reports to, I clicked over here on number. When I clicked on number, I went down to field size, and I clicked on the arrow pointing down, and I chose integer. Interesting. I'm going to have another table called managers, possibly. And in there's going to be an employee number. And I'm going to link this field called reports to the manager's employee number. In order to make sure that those two work out well, I have to make sure that this field's a number field. Because text and numbers do not link nicely. So I have to make sure that you guys did this. I lopped off the word imp in front of it because this field doesn't necessarily belong to the employees table. It's borrowed. It's going to be borrowed from the managers table. Since it's borrowed, we call it the foreign key. Case in point, an employee in this table isn't a manager. It doesn't report to itself. It reports to a manager. Hence, it's not common. Hence, it becomes foreign. It belongs to another table. When it belongs to another table, I'll either add that table name to the beginning of it or just leave it off. We good about that? All right, let's finish the last field. Job title. Once again, this is another one that belongs to another table. I'm going to leave that as text, and I'm also going to leave it as 255. All right, let's save this. Let's go up top, click on the floppy drive, or the floppy disk. Notice I haven't entered in any information. I haven't put a person's first name or last name or their phone number. All I have done is design the container. That's it. Now I need to take off the hard hat and switch over. So let's come over here, click on the arrow pointing down in the views group. And let's click on data sheet view. Do you notice now my fields are listed horizontally? They go across the screen. You'll notice they're not very pleasant either. It says employee number, imp last name, imp first name, imp extension. It's not very user-friendly. You'll also notice that I have this little star here. Then I have the word new under employee number. Is that what you guys have? Down here I have the navigation bar. And it says records, 1 of 1. Is that what you guys have? Hit the tab key and type in your last name. When you do that, did it automatically generate the number 1 symbol? So today you can go home and say, my teacher called me number 1. You're the first employee in the table. Seems logical, start with the number 1, right? Hit the tab key and type in your first name. Hit the tab key and make up some phone number. And keep on tabbing across from field to field, making up information as you go by. This office code is going to be a little bit tricky, but for now I'm going to put a 1 in there. Reports 2 is also going to be tricky. Why am I saying that's tricky? I don't have other tables. I don't have the office table, and I don't have the manager's table, right? So I'm shooting in the dark. I'm taking a guess that there's an office that has an office number of 1. I could be completely wrong. My office is 201, so this would not work. Likewise with the reports 2. I'm taking a guess that there's going to be a manager with a number 1. I have no clue. Job titles. Some people call them sales representatives. Other people call them something else. So once again, I'm taking a guess here. Let's hit enter. Now come down here to the status bar. What does it say? How many records do you have? Notice I'm not calling these rows anymore. A record is a group of related fields. Here it is. An employee at our company consists of a number, last name, first name, extension, email, and so on. Hit the tab key. Type in your neighbor's information. Just look at their screen. They've already done it for you in the previous row, right? Adam, what's your last name? Notice as you are filling out this record, there's a little pencil a little pencil icon that appears on the record selector. Listen to terminology. These little gray buttons over here to the left of the record is called a record selector. When you are making changes to a field, that pencil is going to appear because you're in edit mode. Remember in Excel when you guys pressed the escape key, what did it accomplish? It canceled out any of your changes that you made. What do you think will happen if you hit the escape key in Access? Here I typed in sales. I'm going to hit escape. And it went back to the previous entry, which was nothing in this case. So that's just a nice little tidbit. I'm going to hit enter. And I'm going to leave it like that. Now I'm going to add another person. I'm going to make this person up. I'm going to hit the tab key. I'm going to say Doe. Hit the tab key twice. Make up some phone number. Hit the tab key. Skip the email. Skip the office code. Skip the reports. And for student, I don't know. We'll call this, floor cleaner. Were you allowed to do that? Were you allowed to skip fields? Should you be allowed to skip fields? Why not? I mean, the reason why you're keeping track of it is because you feel that it's important. And if a person can skip a field, guess what? It's not important. You shouldn't be keeping track of it. This is why when you guys are on a web form, there's a little red asterisk next to fields that are important. I wonder if we could do that here. I wonder if we can force the person before they can create a new record that it makes requirements. What view do you think you should be in if you want to try this? Notice we're in the data sheet view right now. The only thing you can do in a data sheet view, technically, is to be allowed to enter in data. Personally, this view should not exist because you should be using forms to enter in data. But hell, it's there. It makes it easier for us to do, and that's why a lot of people like using Microsoft Access. What view should you be in if you wanted to change a field property? Go back to the Home tab. Over the View area, click on the triangle underneath View, and click on Design View. Did you notice you weren't asked to save anything yet? All that stuff you put in there is recorded right to the hard drive. Power goes out, no big deal. Notice when you do have to save, though, it's when you make changes to the fields. All right. Let's click on last name. Down here, under properties, do you guys have the property called required? What does it say right now? What do you think it should say? Do that for all of them. Oh, thank you. I didn't know that. You learned something new. And it worked. That's nice. So folks, if you do double click on the no and the required property, it will change it to yes. That's rather nice. All right, now you notice I said this was very user unfriendly in the sense that when you looked at the field names, they were just divulging too much information. Let's go back and click on employee number up top in the fields. Down below, do you see you have a caption property? Let's click on that caption. Let's just type in capital employee, space, number. Actually, let's do ID. I like ID better. Sorry. Notice I put a space in here. I told you not to do it when it comes to field names. But captions, it's all good. Let's click on employee last name. Go back to caption. And this time let's just type in last space name. And where it says first name, let's click on that. And you know the routine. First space name. And where it says extension, I'm going to click on caption and type in phone number. And obviously when it says on email, I'm just going to click on that and type in email address. Where it says office code, I'm not too big on that. In fact, I'd rather type in region. Where it says report to, I don't like that. Where it says caption, I might type in manager. And now I'm going to go back to job title. And where it says caption, I'm just going to type in job space title. Because it's sort of appropriate.
What did you type in?
Manager. To each is their own. See, this view is the behind-the-scenes view. Let's change the view to data sheet view. It's going to ask you to save it. Remember we were switching views? It didn't ask us before, but this time it is because we made a structural change. Let's click yes to save it. And now they're going to say, well, the integrity rules were violated. Do you want the existing data to be tested with the new one? I'm going to say no. The reason why they were violated was because we left those blank fields in there. And then I went back and made them required. And this is cool if you have a lot of records, because now the next thing it would do if you click on yes, it would give you all those records with problems, and then you can fix them. Like I said, I'm just going to click no because there's only one record that's being problematic, and we're going to fix that right now. So let's go where it says first name. We're just going to type in John, hit the tab key, make up an email, john@doe.com, whatever, region 3, manager 2. And if you were to try to make another record with blank fields, it would yell at you and it wouldn't let you go past the new marker. Okay? You know what? I don't care for John. I'm going to delete him. How would you delete a record in a database? Yeah, you're going to click on the record selector. In fact, you're going to right click on that. And then you have the thing that says delete record. Notice it doesn't delete row, just delete record. And say yes. Let's add another employee. Let's add Jane Doe. Hit the tab key, Doe, but notice this time the employee number is what? By the way, is it a good idea to delete records out of a table? Even if you might not use them? Hey, information's king, right? You can sell that puppy to somebody else, you might as well leave it in the database. So no, it's not a good idea to always delete things, unless you're running out of space. Let's see, jane@doe.com, region 3, boss 2, sales. Let's close out of this table. Now you guys are getting the gist of the difference between the views, datasheet view and design view. We're going to create another table. We're going to create it very simple. It's going to be first name, last name, and manager ID number. That's it. Okay? Of course, we can add to it later, but all I want to do is show you the relationship between the employees and the managers. That's all. In fact, maybe I shouldn't have called the table employees, but rather salespeople. Classify them under one department. Isn't that what we do in businesses? We might have a marketing department, a sales department. Why can't we do that in our database? But this time, the way we're going to create this table isn't going to be in design view, but rather data sheet view. It's going to be on the fly, if you will. So go and click on the Create tab. This time, just click on Table itself. Now, as I expressed earlier, I'm not a big fan of this. But you notice automatically they create the ID field for us? Every table should have a primary key. Because every record should be uniquely identified so I can look it up. Or I can build relationships on them. Okay? Notice I have this click to add. Let's do that. Let's click on click to add. First thing it's going to ask us for, what type? Let's click on text. Now it's called field 1 generically. Let's call this one man last name. Because remember, this is manager. And up top in my ribbon, I have all those properties that were once down below. Do I need 255 characters for this person's last name? No, let's click on that and only leave it at 25. Where it says name and caption, let's click on that. Notice it jumped to ID for me. Alright, let's click OK. But what happened to the field? Did it take man last name? I hate this view with a passion. See, every time you make a change, you have to hit enter to confirm it. You think because it's selected, it's active, that you can go up there and do those stupid things. So let's right click on that, or actually you can go up to name and caption automatically. And it should have field 1 in there. Replace that with man last name, no spaces, capital L, capital N, caption, last space name. Where it says description, type in manager's last name. Even though the caption itself should be self-explanatory, you never know when you get an idiot. Where does the description appear? Right down here in the status bar. Notice I'm still in that field that says manager's last name. So if you had a proper architect that designed your database, or a database administrator, they would fill out those properties, and down at the status bar you should be able to see those properties. Well, if I added a last name, I better add a. So let's click on click to add, click on text. I'm not going to change that stupid thing just yet. I'm just going to change the field size to be 25, hit enter, go back to field 1, click on name and caption, and then replace field 1 with man first name, tab caption, first name, description, manager's first name. Let's save this table. Let's click on the floppy drive, floppy disk. Let's call it managers and click OK. Now, you could have asked, managers are employees, so why don't they appear in the employees? And as I mentioned earlier, I'm not a big fan that we call this employees. We should have developed them up by departments. But let's just talk about hierarchy. An employee, let's flip it around. A manager can have many employees underneath them, correct? That's the key here, that relationship. That a manager can have many employees underneath them. In order for me to develop that relationship, I had to separate the two in two separate tables. Otherwise, I would have like a circle reference within the table, which you can't do. Because records represent a topic, but they're not connected within each other. In other words, as students, you guys don't answer to each other. You answer to me, the teacher. Does that make sense? So, let's talk about this relationship. I need at least one record in here so we can have something. So let's click on last name. And we're just going to type in, I don't know, John Denver. I really don't care. Be creative, guys. Did the ID field put a 1 in there for you? No? Did it put a 2 in there for you? Did it put anything in there for you? All right, so Carl, you're saying no, there's no 1 in there. Do you have an ID field? All right. Now we need to make sure it's an auto number. Oh, yeah, hit the tab key, though. Now start typing in a name. Yeah, it's saying that a record doesn't exist until you actually fill it in with something. All right, so this becomes important because if there's not a 1 in there and it's some other number, remember what we did to the employees table, right? We took a guess. We said this person's going to be answering to number 1. If this wasn't a number 1, I couldn't change it to make it a number 1 because it's an auto number. Now let me show you why this becomes important. Let's close out of this table called managers. And now I'm going to click on database tools. So let's go up to the top in a tab called database tools. And I'm going to click on that button called relationships. Bless you. And now I get the show table. I'm just going to click on employees, so it's highlighted in blue, and click add. Then I'm going to click close. I'm only doing that to illustrate what might happen to you guys when you're in a rush. See, a relationship requires at least 2 entities, correct? So I only have one table. And like I said, I can't do a self-relationship. So you can't say me, myself, and I in this circumstance. You don't answer to yourself. So let's go back and click on the show table button. And now let's click on managers. And let's click add. Then click close. And what I should have is 2 tables next to each other, right? Now we got to ask ourselves this. Which one's the one side? Which one's the many? In our company, is it a good idea for our employees to have more than one boss? No, let's have them answer to one person. But is it a good idea to have a manager have more than one employees? So a manager can have many employees. This is the one side. Let's grab this border right here and drag it down so I get to see all the fields. You notice this is showing the properties, if you will, the fields of this table. Let's click and hold on the ID field and drag it on top of reports to. So by clicking and holding and dropping it on top of the field reports to in the employees table, I get a relationship dialog box. And it says manager's ID is connected or related to employees report to. I need to put a check in here. It says enforce referential integrity. That is, you can't just willy-nilly assign report numbers to employees. You can only have a finite set. Either they're going to report to manager 1, 2, or 3. Okay? So that's what that does. Now we have this other thing. Cascade updates and Cascade deletes. What comes to your mind when we talk about cascading? Waterfall, a trickle-down approach. That when a record changes, that all the records associated to it will also change. Case in point, managers. In our culture, when a female gets married, what do they tend to do? So, when they update their last name, shouldn't all the people that are reporting to this individual see that it's no longer Jane Denver, but somebody else? Getting the idea there? All right, so let's put a check in the update. I love that. However, what about deleting it? Let's say Jane Doe married an employee. Would it be kosher for that employee to still be their subordinate? So what if we break that relationship? Should I update the deleting? In other words, if I say Jane Doe is no longer associated with this employee and I delete her from that entry, should that cascade to all the other people that do report to her? No. So those records shouldn't be deleted. So you got to be careful. Just because you update something doesn't mean that the delete should happen. Another case in point is, what if we no longer sell a product and we delete that out of our table, which you shouldn't do? Should it go back through the history of the database and delete all those previous transactions because at one time we sold them? Unless you're trying to hide from the IRS. All right, let's hit create. Ouch. What does it say? Relationships must be on the same number of fields with the same data type. Is that what you guys have? Let's click OK. What a shame. Can't do anything, so let's hit cancel. What are they talking about here? Between reports to and ID, what are they talking about? Because this happens, and this will happen in your My IT exercises. They're saying there's an inconsistency in data type, right? All right. Let's hit save. At least we'll save the tables. Let's hit this close button right there. Let's open up the managers table in design view. I'm going to right click on managers, and then I'm going to click on design view. Do you see where it says ID auto number? What's the field size? Well, what did we make report to? Integer, right? Long integer goes up to like 32,000, if not beyond. Short integer, up to 255. Hopefully I don't have 255 managers, right? So let's change that to just be integer. So what's the other way of doing it? If we can't change this one to integer, change the other one to, so let's close out of this table. Right click on employees, click on design view, go to reports to, change integer to long integer. Should you be worried that we already have like 3 employees in there? Because we're still keeping to the number type, right? This didn't change up here. All we're doing is expanding the size of the field. All right, save it. Close out of the employees table. Click on the relationship button. Remember, that's back underneath database tools. Now grab the manager's ID field and drop it on top of the reports to field in the employees table. Put that check back in enforce referential integrity and put the check where it says Cascade update and click create. What are they saying now? It might have worked for you guys. Did it work for you guys?
No, mine says the database.
You got another table open. When you guys create relationships, thanks for sharing that with the class, Adam. Adam's situation is saying the database engine could not create the relationship because an object's already used. You want to make sure you close out of your objects before you create relationships. So, Adam, I'm willing to bet that you have this tab up here. It's for another table, whether it's managers or employees. So you might have to hit cancel. But did everybody get this? Let's click OK. Let's hit cancel once again. Close out of the relationship. Let's open up employees. So double click on employees. Do you notice when it says managers, I have 1, 1, and 2? Do you guys have another number other than 1? Vanessa, you're saying no, but did it work for you when you created your relationship? It did not. Okay, I'll have to check yours out. Change manager, your other one that's not a 1 to a 1. So for instance, manager, in my case 2, has to be replaced with a 1. That's where that enforced referential integrity is coming through, because it's making that connection between these two tables. And they're like, I can't find manager 2. So I'm not going to allow this relationship to happen. All right, let me close out of employees. By the way, I know you guys are always in a hurry to enter in data, to build the paper, to do the Excel sheet. Databases do the opposite. You've got to put all that thought prior to it. When you create a table, it is not a good idea to go populate that table, especially when that table is going to have a relationship with other tables. Let these mistakes be lessons. Let's go back to the relationship window. Grab that ID underneath manager and drop it under reports to. Put the enforced referential integrity, put a check where it says update, and hit create. Did it work now, everybody? See, if you tried doing this on your own, you would have no clue what the hell they were talking about when that window popped up. And if you couldn't create this relationship between these two tables, then you're missing the whole point of relational databases. The biggest advantage of using a database over Excel is you reduce data redundancy. See, all I have to do is keep one record of Jane Denver or John Denver. And then I have records for the employees and I make the connection. Otherwise, if I was doing Excel, per every employee, let me save this relationship and close out of it. For every employee, I would have to put John Denver in there, correct? Now, I know names aren't a big deal, but let's talk about product prices. That product is going to be referenced all over the place. I will forget where it's referenced at. But because I establish relationships, I go to one place. I update it there, and everybody gets it. Case in point, your Facebook status. Do you send out updates to everybody? Isn't it done automatically? So when people like you, what are they doing? Are they not establishing a relationship between their Facebook account and your Facebook page? So how is all the data stored in Facebook? In a database. That when you go to one place and you change it, everybody else gets the updates. How are those relationships formed? Not by you saying, okay, so-and-so liked me, let me put so-and-so's number in my table. Just by a nice little thumbs up. Isn't that what happens when you like somebody's page? Do you automatically become their friends or something like that? Very nice graphical approach to something that looks barbaric. Yeah.
So if I'm there and I'm saying, okay, well, I like this person, would that be the form?
Exactly. So the question was, when you're on Facebook and you're interacting, liking things, is that the form? And that is absolutely right. That's the user's interface. But in the background, when you click on that icon, it executes code to store the data in the database. You're seeing the connection now. I love the web because it's very user-friendly. But being a developer and designer for the web is not. But isn't that the purpose? Building an engine is very complex. I don't care how to build it. Just give me the keys, show me where the gas pedal is, and away I go.